Yaki with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, Syria's rejection of an Arab League peace plan comes as no surprise to one analyst. A human rights group urges support for Arab democracies.
We call on the international community to adopt a much more principled approach to the region than it has in the past.
Is allowing Yemen's president to visit the United States a wise decision? And what problems face the Badoon of Kuwait? It's all ahead on VOA. The Syrian government took little time in rejecting Sunday's Arab League plan for President Bashar al-Assad to hand over power to his deputy, accusing the League of trying to interfere in Syria's internal affairs. Arab League foreign ministers called on Damascus to begin a national dialogue with the opposition within 2 weeks and for a new government to be formed in 2 months. This would be a prelude to early parliamentary and presidential elections. The rejection of the Arab League plan by the Assad government, which also called for an extension and reinforcement of a League observer mission in Syria, comes as no surprise to Amin Sakal, director of the Center for Arab and Islamic Studies at Australian National University. He spoke with VOA's Victor Beattie.
He and the people around him are convinced that they will be able to bring the insurgency under control by continued use of force. And the Arab League proposal is very much similar to the one which has been enacted in relation to the Yemeni president. And that proposal came from the Gulf Cooperation Council, which basically said that Mr. Saleh should step down in favor of his vice president, and the vice president would hold a general election in pursuit of transforming Yemen into a democracy. Well, I think the Yemeni case now is on the verge of being implemented, but I doubt it very seriously that the Arab League proposal will cut much ice with Mr. Assad and his colleagues.
The League is also announcing it's going to extend and boost the number of observers of its mission to try to end 10 months of this violent crackdown against dissent. Will that make any difference?
Again, I don't think it is going to make a lot of difference. I mean, Arab League already has something like about 165 people on the ground, and they've been there for a month, and they have not been able to stem the tide of the regime's violence against civilians, and it is highly doubtful that any increase to the number of observers reaching something like 300 or 400 is going to make much difference, unless the Arab League is prepared to deploy something like 5,000 to 6,000 observers, and with the authority that they could really act against the Assad regime whenever the regime violates any terms of the agreement that it has reached with the Arab League. And I don't think that the Arab League has the resources to do that. So probably the time has come for the Arab League to refer the whole matter to the UN Security Council, and the UN Security Council would have to really act under the UN Chapter 7 in order to bring this situation under control. But at this stage, there's serious doubts about that either, simply because that the United States and its allies may not receive support from China and Russia, and at the same time, they themselves do not really have the appetite for another military intervention in the Middle East.
Sakal says for now it seems time is on the side of the Syrian government. However, he says Damascus is increasingly isolated, and its only hope for support will come from traditional allies Iran, Russia, and China. Even neighbor Turkey, he says, which has been critical of the government's crackdown, opposes any outside military intervention to end the bloodshed. Libya's Abdel Hafez Goga, one of the National Transitional Council's highest-profile members, stepped down Sunday as thousands of university students demonstrated against him in Benghazi. James Buddy has interviewed Hadi Shalouf, founder and president of the Justice and Democracy Party of Libya. He accuses Goga and other former loyalists of ousted dictator Muammar Gaddafi of trying to steal the Libyan revolution.
First of all, that, there are a lot of people, they refusing that he become a member of National Council from a long time ago. And then there's many a demonstration against him in Benghazi in October and November. And then they say that he should be bring to the justice with Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam. And then he is not really a revolutionist. And then his father is also working with Gaddafi family.
You said that some of those who demonstrated or who are demonstrating against Mr. Goga believe that some people on the National Transitional Council have stolen the revolution. What does that mean?
Last year, from December, there was a mini demonstration in Tripoli and Benghazi where the people, they feeling that the revolution was stolen by Mr. Abdel Jalil, the president of the National Council, and his group. And now they asking the National Council to resign and then to leave everything to the transition government, and until that we will have election for the National Council.
Mr. Goga said that he was stepping down because he did not want Libya to slide into chaos. Is it possible that we could see something like what is happening in Egypt, where there continue to be demonstrations, particularly against the military?
Of course, that's what we are thinking, that we are going to, and then I asked many people to do the demonstration until that we'll establish the rule of the law. And then we need the committee to elaborate constitution first of all, and then after we go to an election. But unfortunately, they would like just to continue to make the declaration of the constitution made by the council, the transition council.
Mr. Shalouf, in order for Libya to be rebuilt into a new Libya, you would think that there should be some toleration, that even people who support the late leader Muammar Gaddafi should be allowed to be in the government. Don't you think so?
As our party, Justice and Democracy, we believe all the people are equal. And then we need to say to all the people who was with Gaddafi, if you don't stolen the money of the country, if you don't waste the wealthy of the country, if you don't commit crimes, you are welcome. We are working together. We are same citizens. But we need justice. This is the only way that we are governing the country. We need to be in the rule of the law.
Hadi Shalouf, founder and president of the Justice and Democracy Party of Libya.
January 25, 2012 marks the one-year anniversary of the Egyptian revolution in Tahrir Square. The protests, which were televised to millions worldwide, were a seminal moment in the Arab Spring youth movement of 2011. We are selecting this date to have a wide-ranging discussion on Facebook live at 1700 UTC on Wednesday, January 25th. Our topic, the Arab Spring 1 year on, better or worse. If you'd like to join us, visit facebook.com/Voice of America. Visit our event page and RSVP. See you on Facebook.
A human rights organization is urging Western powers to support the rights of Arab Spring protesters to build real democracies after ousting strongmen once backed by the West. In its World Report 2012, Human Rights Watch says Western policy toward Arab countries traditionally has been one of containment, backing an array of Arab autocrats to guarantee stability in the region, even as democracy spread in other parts of the world. HRW Executive Director Kenneth Roth.
We recognize that the revolutions in this region have been driven foremost by the people of this region. But nonetheless, we believe that the international community is capable of, at least theoretically, playing a very important supportive role. And thus, we call on the international community to adopt a much more principled approach to the region than it has in the past.
The New York-based group said the reasons many democratic governments made an Arab exception include fear of political Islam and terrorism, the need to keep oil supplies flowing, and a reliance on autocracies to maintain Arab-Israeli peace. But Roth says those nations cannot remain silent.
There's no excuse for any government to tolerate Assad's lethal repression, to close its eyes to Bahrain's continuing systematic crackdown, or to exempt the other monarchs of the region from serious pressure to reform. All autocrats, regardless of how friendly they are to the West, should be dissuaded from using repression to defend their power and their privilege.
Regarding Iraq, HRW's Middle East Director, Sarah Leah Whitson, said that country is quickly slipping back into authoritarianism, despite U.S. claims that it helped establish democracy in the country. Human Rights Watch said the U.S. essentially left behind a budding police state in Iraq, where security forces abuse protesters, harass journalists, and torture detainees. Yemeni officials say President Ali Abdullah Saleh left the country Sunday, preparing to receive a medical treatment in the United States. His departure comes more than 6 months after a bomb attack wounded him amid violent anti-government violence that caused hundreds of deaths. His first stop was the Sultanate of Oman. On Sunday, the U.S. State Department announced the Yemeni leader's request for medical treatment had been approved and said the duration of his visit will be limited and only pertaining to medical treatment. Yemen's parliament Saturday approved a law granting the president full immunity from prosecution, part of a Gulf Cooperation Council-backed plan to encourage him to leave office and end his 33-year autocratic rule. Mr. Saleh signed the plan last November and agreed to transfer presidential powers to his deputy ahead of the February election that will pick his successor. Stephen Zunes is a Middle East analyst at the University of San Francisco. He tells VOA's Victor Beattie only time will tell if allowing Mr. Saleh into the United States was a wise decision.
On the one hand, he has committed what I think most people, particularly in the Middle East, would consider war crimes in the repression of nonviolent civilian pro-democracy demonstrators. At the same time, if allowing him into the United States does indeed make possible a relatively peaceful democratic transition, it would be better for everyone concerned. So the final answer to the question may be better answered in a few months or the next year or whatever transpires in that country subsequently.
Just on Sunday, the group Human Rights Watch issued its report 2012. It urged Western powers, including the United States, to support the rights of Arab Spring protesters to build real democracies after ousting strongmen once backed by the West. The report said the West's previous policy has been one of containment, backing an array of autocrats to guarantee stability. Will this reinforce that view?
Nothing in this report, unfortunately, is new. Despite pro-democracy rhetoric, particularly during the Bush administration, the reality, including during the Bush administration, was to support autocrats that were deemed to be strategic partners. Unfortunately, as President Kennedy once pointed out, those who make peaceful evolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And now we have a chance with the Arab Spring of a nonviolent pro-democracy transition as opposed to radical Islamist forces seizing power by force. So given the events of the past year, it seems particularly imperative for the United States and other Western countries to reevaluate this policy of supporting autocratic regimes. There may not be a lot we can do to specifically encourage the pro-democracy movements per se, but the least the West can do, as it says in the Doctor's Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm, namely stop supporting the tyrants.
Stephen Zunes, a Middle East analyst at the University of San Francisco. Sri Lanka has ordered 161 foreigners to leave the country for propagating Islam in violation of their tourist visas. An immigration official said the missionaries are members of a group founded in India to spread the teachings of Islam. Just over 7% of Sri Lanka's 21 million people are Muslims.
If you're a news junkie and crave the latest news and analysis about the Middle East, follow us on our new and improved Twitter feed, VOA Middle East Wire. You'll find us on Twitter at VOA Middle East. Every day, we tweet VOA's own special reports, analysis, VIP interviews, and podcasts. Plus, you'll get the latest buzz from VOA's entire Middle East producers and correspondents. VOA Middle East on Twitter. Get a read on the news before it happens.
Of all the uprisings of the Arab Spring, chances are you have not heard much about this one. Beginning last February and inspired by protesters in Tunisia, Egypt, and other places, some Kuwaitis also took to the streets. But unlike the other Arab Spring protesters, they weren't looking to topple their government. Instead, they were demanding a basic right that almost everyone takes for granted: citizenship. Today we're speaking about Kuwait's stateless population, and with me in the studio to look at the issue is VOA senior reporter Cecily Hillary. Hey, Cecily.
Hi, Susie.
So what exactly does stateless mean?
Stateless basically refers to anyone who doesn't hold citizenship to a country. Stateless people can be found all over the world. The Roma, or as they used to be known as gypsies in Europe, Palestinian refugees. There are minority Muslims in Asia who are stateless. It's a lot more common than you think. Refugees International thinks that it's about 11 million, and that may be a conservative number. In Kuwait and the other countries of the Arabian Peninsula, the stateless are called bidoon, which is translated directly from the Arabic as without. Some bidoon are descendants of nomadic Bedouins who used to roam around the deserts of the region before modern borders were laid down by the West, I should say. After Kuwait achieved independence in the early 1960s, it opened up a small window of time in which the bidoon could apply for citizenship, but many of them didn't register for one reason or another. For one, they might have been in remote areas and didn't hear about it, or put it off, or some resisted just because citizenship is not really part of the ideology of the nomad. Other bidoon in Kuwait include Palestinians or refugees who fled Iraq during the 1990 Gulf War.
So in practical terms, what does it mean to be stateless?
It impacts your life from birth to death. Think of it. Because they aren't citizens, bidoon can't get birth certificates or driver's licenses, the civil ID cards that function as work permits in that country. So most of them work as vendors and are laborers, although they do serve on the country's military and police force. Bidoon can't legally marry, they can't vote, they can't own property, and they can't get any of the cradle-to-grave social benefits that regular Kuwaitis in the country get, and we should mention Kuwait is a very rich little country. One of the people I spoke to in doing this story was Sarah Lee Whitson. She's the director of Human Rights Watch's Middle East and North Africa division, and she's been an outspoken critic of the Kuwaiti policy on bidoon. I asked her just how many bidoon are there in Kuwait.
Estimates vary, but I think the numbers that we're looking at are probably around 100,000, although, again, the estimates vary between 70 and 130,000.
Now, from the 60s through the 80s, the bidoon in Kuwait enjoyed relatively the same freedoms that everybody else did. But after the 80s, gradually their rights seem to have been taken away from them. Why was this?
Well, I think the first Iraq War, the invasion of Kuwait, played a very large role in that, the government felt that some segments of the bidoon community had not been loyal to Kuwait during the country's invasion, and also subsequent to the invasion started accusing some bidoon of having actually had Iraqi nationality. And, generally the security situation changed and tightened following the invasion of the country to a much stricter regime and a much stricter scrutiny of nationality.
There have been some steps over the years to at least give citizenship to some bidoon. How much has the government worked to solve the problem?
The government has done virtually nothing. They have formed committee after committee to investigate the citizenship claims of the bidoon, every few years there'll be a new committee that's established that makes promises to review the cases. The latest committee has itself said that for about 30,000 of these bidoon, there's no dispute about their citizenship. They're not claiming that they have any alternative citizenship. But in fact, in any given year, they've never approved more than 2,000 new citizens.
Now, we are not talking about a poor country here, and we're also not talking about a huge population. If, let's say, 100,000 bidoon were granted their citizenship tomorrow and weren't eligible for all the perks that come with being a Kuwaiti citizen, would that have much of an impact on the country's economy?
No, I don't think so. As you noted, the price of oil is extremely high, and Kuwait's reserves are plentiful, so they are blessed with material wealth, and I think, frankly, incorporating the bidoon as citizens would really be a blip on the country's finances.
I was speaking with Sarah Lee Whitson of Human Rights Watch.
Now, you say these bidoon have been protesting. How have they been treated?
There were protests last February and March, along with the other Arab Spring protests, which the government effectively squelched. Last December, the rallies were revived, and Friday protests have been going on ever since. Police have used tear gas, rubber bullets, and water cannons to disperse the protesters. We're hearing that some of the protesters did turn violent. Dozens have been arrested on the grounds that they were assembling illegally and they had intention to commit criminal acts. Kuwaiti law stipulates that only citizens are allowed to gather publicly. A total of 52 Bidun are now on trial, and another 32 are under investigation. A couple of weeks ago, the Kuwait Interior Ministry issued a statement that's basically threatening deportation for any Bidun or any of their family members caught demonstrating. So in other words, if your child went out to the streets to protest, you would be deported. The government's also considering other punitive measures like dismissing stateless protesters serving in the military or police or evicting them from public housing projects. It also says it will confiscate security IDs, which is the only form of ID that stateless residents are allowed to have. And Kuwait says it will also refuse all pending applications for citizenship. Now, I spoke with a young Kuwaiti blogger and activist named Mona Karim. She herself is stateless. She says that in her father's day, before the 1980s, Bidun actually got along pretty well in Kuwaiti society, but her generation, she says, faces tremendous discrimination. In spite of all that, as we'll hear, she got lucky.
We have been isolated, we have been mistreated, disrespected, humiliated, denied the very simple rights, marked. We felt marginalized, underrepresented, all of these things through media, among certain communities. And the fact that you would be a young person, hoping and dreaming to get higher education, to get a chance to get employed, and then you clash with reality.
Well, in your own case, for example, how hard was it to get an education?
It was very hard. I mean, I finished my high school and then I was not allowed to go into public education, Kuwait University. So I had to wait, and then I got scholarship from a private committee who wanted like voluntarily to support some students. So I got it. I went to the American University of Kuwait, which is a private university. But in my case, I got really lucky, and I got to do that because I was a published poet since I was 14, published 2 books, so that's why I got to get the scholarship. But like the vast majority of the people don't get these chances, and they cannot afford the private universities.
And again, that was Kuwaiti Bidun activist Mona Karim.
What does the Kuwaiti government say about this policy?
Well, I requested an interview with the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States or some spokesperson, but I didn't hear back from them. Right now, Kuwait is focusing its attention on parliamentary elections that are coming up on the 2nd of February. These are the 4th such elections in 6 years. Kuwait has been engaged in a really long-running political battle between the government that's dominated by the ruling Al-Sabah family and the parliament. So Kuwait's really been jumping between political crises, and it's delayed any key reforms or big projects until the government is settled.
And Kuwait is scheduled to hold parliamentary elections on February 2nd. What about the stateless residents? Are they going to be able to participate?
No, they will not be allowed to vote.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Cecily, for stopping by. Appreciate it, as always.
Thanks.
That was VOA senior reporter Cecily Hillary. And if you listeners want to know more about Kuwaiti, you can read a story by Cecily on MiddleEastVoices.com. This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, a new movie about a boy who suffers the loss of his father on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA program. That's at voanews.com. Online news for a changing world.